I mean, I'm sure you've heard this probably many times on your podcast from people, but the number one myth is that someone else is going to sell your books for you. And that is not the case at all. You as the author, your love, your passion for the book, you are going to be the number one person to sell your book. I always relate it to, like, even my business. We tried hiring salespeople for a while and it just wasn't working because I'm like, this whole company was started from my passion, and ultimately it's always going to be me that needs to sell our programs because I'm the passion behind it, right? It's the same thing with your book. No one is going to be as passionate about your book as you, the story, as the storyteller. And that needs to never, ever die. Like, you cannot let what you might see as failure ever stop you from that, because the most beautiful part about a book and why it's going to change so many people's lives is because it lasts. It lasts forever. It's going to surpass your time here in this world. And I always tell people, like, a lot of people will think, okay, the book's out in the world. This is like, it's the finish line. Like, I'm done. The book is out. No, it's seriously like just, cutting the tape for a business celebration. Like, you need to treat it like a business, except the beauty is that if it's not successful in the first 3 months, like the business, you would have to shut down. With a book, you don't. You can breathe new life into it over and over and over again. Never give up on it, because there are famous authors out there who their book didn't reach number one until 3 years down the road, right? Because suddenly it hits in the right time, the right environment, for whatever reason. It sparks, and that fire you cannot contain once it does. So don't give up on it. Like, always feel that passion. And then on top of it, like, if writing is your goal, don't stop writing, because again, sometimes it's not until book 3 or 4 or 5 are on that you're successful. But then once people fall in love with you as the author and your message and your voice, they go back and read all of your other books. So those other books will always, always serve a purpose. And get on people's podcasts, because then you're reaching a whole new audience of people who wouldn't have heard you otherwise. And it's such a cool way to connect with people, because sometimes too, it might be something you say that wasn't in your book, and people connect with that message, and then all of a sudden you're like, you know what, maybe I should write a book on this, because this is what people are connecting with me about too. Like, having conversations are so beautiful, because it rejuvenates your message, your excitement for your book, but then it's also constant learning, right? Like, learning about how can you continue this and do what you feel called to do.
Okay, everyone, if you listen to one of my past episodes here on Living the Next Chapter, we had a guest, Debbie Weiss, on, and she basically hijacked the podcast talking about a resource that she found that changed her world and made writing her book easier and better, more efficient. She found community, and she found somebody who really encouraged her to do her and share her story and get it out into the world. Lauren Eckhardt is with me today, and I'm excited, a little nervous, because I listen to her podcast as well. But Lauren is here, and she's all about capturing life's journeys to create life-changing books. And everyone has a story, and your story matters, and Lauren can help you with that. And I'm excited about this. Lauren, nice to have you here on the podcast. Welcome to Living the Next Chapter.
Oh, thank you. And that title is the best. I mean, the best title ever. I know. I was drawn here before I even knew it.
Come on. All right. That's amazing. Okay, Lauren, tell us a little bit about where you are, first of all, in the world, and a little bit how you got into all this. Ooh. And because you've helped Debbie.
Yes.
So I already know the results are there. So we're good. But give us some insight. Where are you from, and what's your backstory?
Sure. Oh, man, it's always hard to summarize that, right? Well, the easy part, I'm outside of Nashville, Tennessee. So that's the easy part. As far as how I got here, I mean, I always say it's incredible about life in general. And I think that's part of my obsession with hearing people's life stories, because I'm constantly in awe of all of the little decisions and how it feels like you're getting off path, but you're actually on path, and you don't really know until you look on hindsight, and everything that happens and the people you meet to bring you where you are today. I mean, I just think it's beautiful. And that is part of my obsession with our life stories and why I love helping people write them. But it all started when I was 6 years old, which is crazy. I'm getting ready to turn 40. So when I think about that, I'm like, this was in the works for the past 34 years, essentially, and sometimes you just don't realize it. But I knew when I was 6 that I wanted to be an author. I knew that so clearly. I loved books. Those were my escape. It was more fiction book heavy at the time. Of course, I was not reading nonfiction or memoirs or anything at that age. But the other thing that was happening during that time is that even as a young girl, I was this person where, adults would come and just sit next to me and then tell me their life stories and tell me like their biggest secrets. And I was always like, why are people telling me all of these things all the time? But I learned that a part of it was just listening. People just wanted to be heard and they had stories to tell, but they didn't really have anyone who would listen to them. And sometimes all you need to do is just be quiet for someone else, give them that space, and truly help them feel seen and heard for who they are. And fast forward when I was 9 years old and being a mom now to two young kids, I'm like, oh, I feel so bad for my parents. But, I wrote a collection of stories called One Burning Soul is what I titled it. And it was this collection of essays about my thoughts on racism and divorce and the criminal system and like all of these really big, heavy topics. And I remember just sitting down with a spiral notebook and my pencil, and I'm writing my thoughts on all of these topics. It was just these downloads. And so I called it One Burning Soul afterwards. I had this very clear vision of someone stuck in a glass box, pounding on the walls, screaming for help. And people are just walking by. No one else can see the glass box. They can see out, but no one else can see inside and who's in there. And I didn't realize it at the time. I was just like, okay, this is where the one burning soul came from. Like, it's just a vision, but it stuck with me. And it wasn't until I got a little bit older and I continued to be this person, right, who was always there listening to people, that I started realizing that vision was just really about that desire to be seen and heard for who you are and how easy it is to be lost in the world, to be ignored in the world. And I ended up struggling with that a little bit because here I was constantly listening to other people, but no one was really listening to me. And I struggled. So I almost went like the opposite direction because big emotions at that time, right? Like trying to deal with that. But, like anything, I got off track, went down the corporate world for a while, which was, ended up being beautiful in itself. Human resources, really found a passion for helping people understand their own strengths. So everything was all worth it. But it wasn't until I had my two boys that writing became a priority again. Because I looked at them and just saw the depth of what this life actually is. Started seeing the future, the impact that I wanted to have on this world and that I wanted to have on their lives. And at this time, I was carrying this big boulder on my chest. And it was just this like desire, when you have a dream in your heart, like, and the longer you carry it, the bigger it becomes as it's just sitting and it weighs you down and it suffocates you. And I knew looking at these boys that I had to do something to change it because otherwise I was literally going to suffocate myself and not be the best version of myself for them. And so long story short, I ended up hammering out books when they were really little. I wasn't sleeping, but I had a brand new why of why I wanted to get it done. And then, when you put out books, other people start saying, hey, can you help me write my book? And it was pretty cool how it developed because it went from me just wanting to help other people write their books to like reach a dream that's on their heart so they can feel that same release that I was able to experience. So then really I found my niche and like it's people's stories, their life stories. That's what I want to be able to help bring out. And then it was about turning life stories into books. And now really my core passion is just the importance of writing the story for you. And we can talk about the reason why, but that is my focus now above all else. And then if people want to turn it into a book, I can help you do that too. But
nice.
Yeah. So that's kind of a long story of how I got here today. And it's been a beautiful journey.
What I love about that is it does give you context and it kind of answers a lot of the why about what you do, right? Because it's kind of that underlying current that feeds everything you do, right? That's what I love about that. When I think about somebody talking about writing, the one thing I hear people ask often is, Lauren, what makes a story good? Like, I have a story, but who wants to know my story? Does it matter? Yeah. Like, is it good enough to share? If someone came to you, Lauren, and said, I don't know if my story is good enough, what would you say to them?
That's what everyone starts off saying who comes to me. That is a very real fear for many of us and what prevents a lot of us from actually sitting down to write it, because it's like It's amazing because essentially when we say our stories aren't good enough, it's like, what exactly do you expect it to be? Like entertainment to other people? Like what makes it not good enough? But all of us, even with becoming an author, even if you're writing a fiction book, all of us have this like weird image in our head of what it actually means to be an author. And there's no way that anything we write can actually achieve that same image. But when we break it down, we don't even know what that looks like. It's just this fear blocking us. And it's just the power of, again, writing words on paper. Like once you actually put down on the paper, like, okay, so why wouldn't anyone be interested in this story? Well, why would people be interested in this story? Who in my current life may connect with this story, and why would it make a difference for them? And when we spend the time actually answering those questions, immediately it's incredible the people we think of, the times that we have shared pieces of our stories before, and you see like people's eyes just get wide and they're like, you've gone through that? Like I went through that. I didn't think anyone else has ever gone through that before. Or wow, it feels really good to hear someone else get this. They understand it. And this is just sharing bits and pieces. All of us, anyone who's ever shared a part of our story has felt that connection with another human being when we have shared it. So what makes you think that sharing more of those stories won't also elicit those same sort of responses from other people?
Yeah. And what's interesting about when you release your story into the world is the response you get back from people. I'm a musician, so I've been doing music for over 40 years, do recordings, release music. And you write a song about something, and like a story, you write a song and you're capturing the moment, and you're going in this direction. You release a song. Someone walks up to you years later and says, "Song means so much to me. Thank you for singing about something completely different than I wrote about." Yeah. And you're like, I wasn't writing about that. I was writing about this. But the person receiving it takes it to a different place and comes back to you and says, your song, your book, your story meant something to me in this different area that you weren't even anticipating. Yeah. And I always find that interesting because we have a very clear idea of who we're talking to and what we're trying to say, but someone's going to take it in a totally different direction. Absolutely. And had we not shared that story, we would never even have that interaction with someone. Yeah. So has that happened to you, where someone's come to you and brought their thoughts about something you've written or put out in the world and given a new spin that you didn't even anticipate?
1,000%. Because this is the bottom line. I mean, as humans, it's not always about our exact stories, right? Because we're all going through different things, but it's that level of emotion, those experiences, the certain categories of experiences that we're having. That's what connects us. Because none of our situations are going to be exactly the same, right? But it's all about how we can respond on that emotional level. So it's the same thing. I mean, you can write something, and this even happens with social media posts, right? Like you put out a social media post and it's all about one thing, but people are taking it in a completely different direction. And it's like, wow, because they read those words and that was their perspective, their lens through it. And it's really incredible being able to be open up and receive that, because I think that's one of the things with art in general, whether it's music or art or, writing, that you have to be okay with when you put it out in the world, is knowing that people are going to take their own lens and put their own twist on it. And that's just part of being okay with sharing it. It's not correcting them per se, right? No, this is why I wrote this song. It's letting them feel what they need to feel. That's the release that they need.
Yeah, I love that. And to be a content creator in whatever form, and to put your thoughts and your story into the world and see how it fits in the big mix of everything going on, it's kind of interesting to do that. And that's the one thing I love about talking to people who are battling with getting their story into the world. And I have listeners that are listening to our show who are new authors. They haven't really started the process. They're just beginning. So they're here to get insight from you on that starting point and getting that story from your mind and in you out there onto paper. Mm-hmm. Any little tips from your perspective with a new author that would come into your writing group and into actually getting that process started?
I have a lot of tips. So I'll start with some of the basic. I work primarily with new authors. So, I mean, like I said, a lot of the same fears come up, a lot of the same questions come up all the time. And I say that to encourage people, because You think about people out there with published books, people who did it, they started off in that same place with a lot of the fears and a lot of the questions, not knowing how to get to the next step. And it is literally one tiny step after another. That's all it is. But we look at writing a book, sharing your story, we see just the mountain, right? And we think we have to take the entire mountain at once. And it doesn't work that way. It's truly one step at a time. And the two things that I say the most when it comes to starting off with writing your story is number one, like figure out what the theme is. That is number one. You have to know the ultimate direction that you're going in with your book. Otherwise, you're going to end up in 50 billion different directions and none of it's going to make sense and you're going to feel defeated by it. And one of the best ways, which is also tip number two, is take a big sheet of paper or a blank notebook and just start brain dumping all of those stories that are coming to the surface of your mind first. Like when you thought about sitting down and sharing your story, why? There were very specific stories that were coming to your mind at the time. So why? Why those stories? Start writing them down, capture them, and then do like a little, like almost like circling, like sort of like you're figuring out a puzzle. What are the themes behind these stories? Why did these come to my mind first? And figure that out, because that will really help shape your book. Like, what is that ultimate message that I'm delivering? Because these are the stories that support that theme, that support that message that I want people to be able to take away. And then, of course, it's knowing your why behind it. Like, is there someone that you hope to be able to help through this book? Are you wanting to be able to capture a certain message for your kids or to leave behind in this world someday? Like, yeah. What is the why? And let that also shape the stories that you tell and the message that you deliver.
For new authors that are writing, any writing tips on the process that you would suggest? I know we're all coming at it from different directions and we're all different people and we have our own motivations, but is there some really good writing practices that we should probably think of putting on at the beginning of our writing process?
Mm-hmm. Like once we actually know what we're writing about?
Yeah, exactly.
My favorite, hands down, is just obviously put time on your schedule to be able to write the story and to work on it, because otherwise everything else in this world will come up and take priority over it. So number one, treat it like you're meeting with somebody to be able to write your story. And number two, like the best thing are just these like bursts of time. That's the best way to get into the flow, because you will feel resistance. So when you sit down to write, you're going to feel like where do I, how do I actually start with this? And sometimes all you need to do is take one of your single stories or your single ideas and say, this is what I'm going to focus on for 10 minutes. If that's all you can do, 10 minutes. I like 20 to 25 minute bursts at a time where I'm literally setting a timer, turning off all distractions, because if I can't focus on this for 20 minutes, like I'm not going to be able to do anything, right? Like just focus on this and do not get distracted. And you'll be surprised. It might not start right away, but when you know that you have this time that's actually dedicated to this, and you sit down and you say, okay, I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to start writing. And you know, this timer has you locked in for 20 minutes. You'll be surprised at what actually comes out of you. Sometimes when you have to start by like forcing it out, but then eventually a flow will be there and you'll find yourself getting excited at the things that you're remembering or the things that you're writing as a result.
Okay, I love it. So you have a writing community, and I know that's one thing Debbie talked about with glowing reviews on the podcast. And again, Debbie, thank you for making all this happen.
Thank you, Debbie.
Yes, thank you, Debbie. That's great. Talk a little bit about what a writing community is from your perspective and how it would benefit a new author.
Sure, absolutely. So we do have two through Burning Soul Collective and Burning Soul Press. One is for writers specifically, and then one is for authors. I mean, they pretty much separate it in that way. And even the authors get access to the writers because in the writing community, because the authors are focused on writing their book specifically, right? But in the writing community, it's just all about spending time writing. Because a lot of people will come in and be like, I just don't think I'm a good writer. Like, I kind of want to write a story, but I just don't think I'm a good writer. Well, it's like anything, right? Like the more time you spend doing anything, that's how you get better and better and better. But if you're not spending time doing it, you're not going to improve. So that's one of our biggest philosophies behind this writing community. We show up There's 2 slots, Monday through Friday, that people can choose, where they show up on Zoom and spend 45 minutes to an hour writing as a group. And the reason why we have 2 different slots, first of all, to fit different people's schedules, but what happens is you're not committing then to yourself, right? Which is easy to just throw away and say, oh, something else came up. So it's a meeting with me, so I can throw that away. When you are scheduling time with a community and you start building the relationships within that community, it feels like you're showing up for someone else, even though you're doing it for you. Like that's ultimately what you're doing. You're still showing up for your writing to make it happen, but it feels like you're showing up for a community. And there's something else that's so powerful. Like when you know other people are writing on this Zoom call together, like there's energy behind it. Like we always have people say like, this is the only time I can write is like when I'm doing it in this community, because you can feel that collective energy from everyone else coming in. And you feel encouraged and you feel inspired. And, we'll do like sometimes little 20-minute sessions, and then we'll talk in between about our success and what we worked on and some of the things we're struggling with. And it's all about that support and from other people who get it, because no one else understands a writer like a writer. We understand what goes on in our minds, our hearts, the paper, as we're trying to pour the words there. Community is everything. And I started off writing without that community. And now that I have it, because I built it with, what we do here, I can't imagine writing without it, because it just makes all the difference. And it makes it so much more enjoyable too, to be able to share it with other people and to celebrate with other people when you reach big milestones. And not only that, but when you reach these big milestones and then in your head, you're like, this is still not good enough. Like I just did 10,000 words. That's all I have. And then you hear the other community go, 10,000 words? Like you're at 10,000 words? That's awesome. And it reminds you to celebrate even those little moments for you. So it's a game changer.
It's great. It's great. And that seems like that's one thing Debbie kind of honed in on as well from her story, is that really that community helped her so much. So kept her on track those days where she didn't feel like writing, or it wasn't a priority that day. She knew she had an appointment to meet and she had people counting on her. And that was the one thing that brought her back to the meetings. And we joked that it seemed to be like probably the most boringest Zoom call ever, to have a bunch of people quietly working away, but just knowing that there's people in the background also doing what you're doing, but there's nobody doing lights and cameras and action and video. None of that's happening. It's just quiet writing. And that must be a very interesting Zoom call.
It is. I love them. I think it's it's seriously exciting. And it's funny because it's like, if I was to write about this in a book, it would seem very boring, But when you're in it, oh man, it's powerful. And then just getting to know people, it's amazing. And what's really cool too, like other people get to see other people's journeys, right? So it is encouraging and inspiring when it's like suddenly you're writing together. Now this person is having a published book, and it's like, we were just there writing together. Like I can do this too because they did it, It's amazing. So it's fabulous.
Amazing. So I have a lot more questions for you, but while we're on the topic, tell everybody about the writing community. You were mentioning that it's up, it's running, it's coming, and all that stuff. How do people connect with you about the writing community specifically? And what does that look like to onboard into that group?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking that. So if you go to right now, burningsoulpress.com, or you can go to Burning Soul Collective, honestly, it's on both of those. Burning Soul Press is just a little bit more geared towards authors, where Burning Soul Collective is for everyone. You'll see the writing group there. It's also called the Soul Writer Society right now. But that is the page where you can sign up to become a part of this group. And we're getting ready to do so much more with it. Like I said, now we have these Monday through Friday, twice a day writing sessions that you can join. And you can join as many or as few as you want. Like it's totally up to you and your schedule. We're also going to be doing writing training sessions monthly in these groups as well. So it's going to be more than just writing together, but it's actually helping people become better writers. The tips and tricks on how to improve your writing day by day. And then, of course, we're going to have those community sessions where we're all coming together and meeting each other and encouraging each other just outside of writing, right? Just that chance to get to know each other. We're also going to have sessions where it's a chance to read what you are writing, which is very empowering. This is something we do in our authors group specifically. And it has been very transformative for people, because when you start putting your actual voice behind the words you write, changes it, and it almost makes you feel more empowered. So that's our writing group. And then you can join just by signing up, essentially, and taking part. And then we'll welcome you into our private Facebook group, and you'll have the Zoom call link that you can join the sessions on and just participate in the community. And then with our authors group specifically, it's called our Soulful Author Journey Program. That is more of every week we are meeting and we are talking about your book. We are brainstorming ideas for your book. We are helping you overcome very specific obstacles in relation to your book, helping you set those timelines of what you need to write about in order to complete this book by a certain amount of time. So it's more book focused, and we're also guiding you through publishing. If you want to self-publish, in the modules that come with it, like it's step-by-step self-publishing, it's how to promote your book. And then I'm coaching people every step of the way. So it's through every part of the writing journey, the writing, the publishing, the promotion, and you are getting support every step of the way through that. So it's really powerful. And that was part of what Debbie was a part of. And it's just knowing that you're supported every step of the way. And in this author group, it's both groups are great, but this author group specifically, we've been able to bring in people who are not just wanting to write a book. They want to write a book that truly makes a difference in this world.
Right.
And that changes everything when suddenly all of your conversations aren't just about, am I writing a book? Am I writing a book that's literally going to change people's lives? And how do I make the right steps after it's out to still change people's lives? It's incredible for that reason.
And the through line through all of that is the community part of it, right? You're not doing this by yourself.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And they have access to you, which is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm excited. How many, roughly off the top of your head, how many authors have come through the program with you that have actually gone all the way to the finish line? Their book is out in the world. Do you have a rough number for us?
That's a great question. I have not. I am the worst. Like my integrator will even tell you this. I am the worst when it comes to numbers on stuff, because numbers trip me up, right? Like I'm like, my focus is whoever I can help, I want to help, period. Like I cannot start thinking about numbers. I know a lot of people. So that's what I can say for sure.
How long has the group been running?
So the Soulful Author Journey program in different variations. We used to do like a 12-week session, then moved to 16 weeks. And that was just like enough time for people to write their books. Now we offer up to a year long and on if they want to, which is really great, because it's like, as long as you need the support, like we're here, versus like the 12 weeks or the 16 weeks. Cause I'm like, it's so much more than just writing, like it's the full support that you need throughout. So it's gone through several variations, but it's been running since I started the business essentially. And that's been 3 years now. Over 3 years now. Time flies.
Wow.
And then the other group is fairly new.
Good. And again, for the person listening, trying to decide whether or not this is for them, who are you looking for to join this community? I'm asking because I'm thinking you're looking for people to come not just to take, but to also to give to the community.
1,000%. That's
right?
Community.
So yeah. So who are you looking for? Who would be a great person for this? I
mean, number one, just someone who's vulnerable. That's the big thing, right? Like really creating that atmosphere where it feels like we all can come in and we feel safe in our vulnerability and our transparency as we are sharing our stories that we're writing and trying to get the help that we need, because it's not easy. In writing stories of this element, especially if you're looking at your memoir, self-help, inspirational book, where it is wrapped in your life journey, it is very personal. And it's hard on a completely different level than just writing a fiction book. So people who come in, they need to be ready to be transparent, to be vulnerable. Yeah. So that's honestly number one, because that's what shaped so much of our programs. And that's the type of people we have in right now. And it's everything to have that. But yeah, like you said, someone who's as willing to give, in the sense of, being able to share what they're learning, because all of us are experiencing different things. That's my number one method of what I teach in any of my programs is I'm not going to tell you specifically how to do this, how to write, how to do any of this. I'm going to give you all the different ways to do it. And it's up to you to experiment with what feels good to you. So knowing that everyone's on their own personal journey and what works for one person won't work for the other person. So it's not about forcing your ideas, your thoughts on other people. It's listening to each other and learning from each other. But to learn from each other, we also have to be able to share about our own, and what we're doing and learning.
Amazing. Again, I'm on your website. The one thing I see right at the top is enroll now, how to become a ghostwriter course. I find ghostwriters the most interesting and curious people. I would think that as a ghostwriter, you'd want to go and share everybody to the world. I wrote this book, but I'm not allowed to tell you about it. And I would be like, that would be the most. I'd be walking through my local bookstore going, yeah, that's my book, but I can't tell you that. That would be so hard to do. I find ghostwriters to be very unique people. I had a ghostwriter on, and one thing that they said that really caught me was they wanted to give a voice to people who couldn't write the book they wanted to.
Yeah.
So they had an example of a business person, very highly sought after, on the speaking circuit, very professional, very, very successful, but wrote at a grade 8 level. And he came and gave voice to this person to create his memoir and his book for his family and for his business. And the joy of creating the platform, setting up the microphone, getting the lights right, and then kind of doing all that behind the scenes stuff and letting this person share their story through his pen, I thought was the most unique and selfless thing that any writer could do. Talk about your ghostwriter course and what is this all about and how does this work?
Yeah, it honestly goes back to, me being very, very clear on what my life mission is, and that's to help people capture their life stories. And of course, I want to be able to encourage people to write their own. But like you said, a lot of people either don't have the time, the energy, the interest, or maybe even the, writing ability to truly be able to give justice to the story so it can make the impact that it needs to make in the world. And I'm one person though. Like right now I'm involved in an organization where people are constantly coming to me and being like, I need a ghostwriter. I need a ghostwriter. I'm like, it's hard because I'm one person and I want to help you so badly because, I can talk about it, but ghostwriting is the most challenging thing I do, but also equally the most rewarding thing that I do. Because the whole process is completely transformative for the person and transformative for me. And I can talk about that more, but to get back to the course, I was like, I feel like, okay, that is part of my purpose, but to be able to actually achieve this, to be able to capture as many stories as what I want, I need to be able to bring up a team of other ghostwriters who can do this too. And I've worked with clients who they've gone through a ghostwriter and then they're coming through us to publish it or whatever it might be. And the ghostwriting results just weren't where they needed to be. And a big part is that the person didn't push hard enough, the depth of the story. They're just capturing versus asking the right questions to really reach in and get that depth, because that depth is going to be what truly connects with people and truly changes lives, right? And as a ghostwriter, you have to be willing to push hard sometimes, to peel back those layers, to pull back the veil, to have that deep message that the person's actually wanting to share be revealed. And it can be hard to do that. But I'm like, after seeing some of these other works come in, I'm like, I want to be able to bring up a team of ghostwriters who feel comfortable doing that because they understand the bigger purpose behind this all and what this book can truly do to change people's lives. And to do that as the writers, as the representatives, we have to be willing to push and push and push. So that's part of what I want to be able to build up is ghostwriters who can help me with this mission right now.
Wow. So if you're interested in ghostwriting, I think you've just tweaked your ears there for sure. Definitely head over to the website. We'll have all the links again in the show notes, but Lauren is here to help you. She's waving the flag. I need help, people. If you're an author, seems like a great course. It starts in September.
Yes.
And runs till October.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. It's and it will be going over everything with, how to get started with ghostwriting, even the very basics, right? Like, this is not for people who have been ghostwriting. I just want to clarify that. This is truly for those who have never started. They have been interested. They don't know where to start. We are going from the basics and on with what it's all about. How do you actually do it? How do you structure the work? How do you pull out the ideas? How do you price it? How do you find clients? Like everything.
Wow. Okay. I love it. You mentioned about the transformation happening doing this from your perspective. How will this transform a writer, and will it help them in their own writings as well, being a ghostwriter?
1,000%. I was really fortunate because it was early on in my business when I was helping people write books that someone first came to me and was like, hey, I know you're helping people write books. I have a story I want to tell, but I don't want to write it myself. Will you write it for me? So I had never thought about ghostwriting before. I listened to her story and I was like, holy cow, this is going to help so many people by hearing that this is what you've gone through and this is how you've come out of it. Like, yeah, if you're not going to write it, I would love to be a part of this journey with you, like 1,000%. And she's like, okay, great. Like, how much is it going to cost? And I was like, I don't know. What do ghostwriters get paid? So I looked it up and, it's pretty cool looking back because I was like, okay, 36,000. And she's like, okay, let's do this. And I was like, it's that easy? Like, okay, let's do this.
Wait. Yeah.
And, it's pretty incredible because I went in, I was like, okay, like this feels like a real writing gig, right? Like the first time I'm writing for someone else. And she had gone through years of therapy to come to this point to be able to share her story with the world. And what was incredible is through this process of interviewing her, because when you're writing someone's story, obviously you can't make it up. You have to interview them and really go into depth of what they've experienced and to know how to be able to bring that to the pages. And, this is like anything, ghostwriting or not. This is part of my passion of sharing your story, writing it yourself, hiring someone else, you as the ghostwriter, writing it on behalf of someone else. What happens during this time is that people could journal in their life forever, right? Like that's great. It helps you. When you start flipping the lens and actually writing about your story in terms of a book, I mean, what happens? Like we grow up reading fiction books. What are we doing? We're reading about the hero of the story, their development, what they go through. We are cheering for them to become a better person, to reach their goal. So when you are writing a memoir, that's essentially what you're doing with you. You are the hero of the story that now you're being written about in that way. And when you start seeing your life in that way, you're like, you start seeing you in a completely different perspective.
Well, yeah.
So seeing that, being a part of that with her, how can you not be transformed yourself as you're watching that? And then, so that was number one. And then, like you said, on the flip side, when the book gets out and you start seeing all these reviews come in of other people's lives and the transformation, knowing that you helped be a part of that, it's incredible, like absolutely beautiful. And so what you were saying with like how it even helps you write, I mean, every time you get clients in, I mean, number one, you want to feel aligned with them because ghostwriting is hard. And if you're not excited about the project or their message or their story, it's going to be draining for you. Do not do projects you're not excited about. But every time you get a new client, it's a completely different voice. It's a completely different story perspective that you're trying to capture. So your writing has to change, right? You can't write the same way as though you're writing your own books and your voice is the same consistently. You are writing their voice, their tone from their full perspective. So you are fully putting yourself in the shoes of that person to be able to write this book. Your writing is naturally going to get better each time you do that because you're learning so much. It's beautiful.
Love it. Okay, so we sold everyone on this. I think we're going to have a flood of new people wanting to become ghostwriters, and we're going to fill up that class right away, which is going to be great. Actually, go to the website, everyone, if you're interested, and make sure you connect with Lauren about that. I have one more question for you at the end, Lauren. You've been very gracious with your time. Where can we find everything? Let's talk about it again. What I really love about your website is it's not just a cool name you found on Google. It's the story back to where we started in the interview together and how this all came to be. That's, again, a nice reason to share your backstory because now the website makes sense. Everything we've talked about makes sense. It all aligns back to your original message from you as a child writing. So I love kind of how all that fit together. So
makes me tear up
take us
every
to
time.
the website. See, I know it's great. It's a great story. See, it's a great story. Lauren, take us back through the website and where you're most active on social media. And then I have a question for you at the end.
Sure. So Burning Soul Collective is essentially the main one right now for you to turn to, especially with being interested in writing. So just look at burningsoulcollective.com. And we are also Burning Soul Collective on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. We've explored, so it's out there. You can also follow me personally with Lauren Eckhardt Writes.com. And then also Lauren Eckhardt Writes on Facebook and Instagram.
Okay, Lauren. So for a new author, they are done, they're published, they have their box of books have arrived on their doorstep. They've told all their friends and family, they've sold 10 copies. What do we do now? As far as promoting our book, getting it out there into the world, and what's maybe the value of being on a podcast as a guest? It's a selfish question, I know. But being a guest on a podcast to promote your book, is there benefits? What do you see there? Best way to promote our stuff? What would you suggest?
Talking, connecting, networking. I mean, I'm sure you've heard this probably many times on your podcast from people, but the number one myth is that someone else is going to sell your books for you. And that is not the case at all. You as the author, your love, your passion for the book, you are going to be the number one person to sell your book. I always relate it to like, even with my business, we tried hiring salespeople for a while and it just wasn't working because I'm like, this whole company was started from my passion. And ultimately it's always going to be me that needs to sell our programs because I'm the passion behind it, right? It's the same thing with your book. No one is going to be as passionate about your book as you, the story, as the storyteller. And that needs to never, ever die. Like you cannot let what you might see as failure ever stop you from that, because the most beautiful part about a book and why it's going to change so many people's lives is because it lasts. It lasts forever. It's going to surpass your time here in this world. And I always tell people, like, a lot of people will think, okay, the book's out in the world. This is like, it's the finish line. Like I'm done. The book is out. No, it's seriously like just, cutting the tape for a business celebration. Like you need to treat it like a business, except the beauty is that if it's not successful in the first 3 months, like a business, like the business, you would have to shut down. With a book, you don't. You can breathe new life into it over and over and over again. Never give up on it, because there are famous authors out there who their book didn't reach number one until 3 years down the road, right? Because suddenly it hits in the right time, the right environment, for whatever reason. It sparks, and that fire you cannot contain once it does. So don't give up on it. Like always feel that passion. And then on top of it, like, if writing is your goal, don't stop writing, because again, sometimes it's not until book 3 or 4 or 5 are on that you're successful. But then once people fall in love with you as the author and your message and your voice, they go back and read all of your other books. So those other books will always, always serve a purpose. And get on people's podcasts, because then you're reaching a whole new audience of people who wouldn't have heard you otherwise. And it's such a cool way to connect with people, because sometimes too, it might be something you say that wasn't in your book and people connect with that message. And then all of a sudden you're like, you know what, maybe I should write a book on this, because this is what people are connecting with me about too. Like having conversations are so beautiful because it rejuvenates your message, your excitement for your book. But then it's also constant learning, right? Like learning about how can you continue this and do what you feel called to do.
So, Lauren, I'm going to use the name of my podcast. And one last question for you. It's Living the Next Chapter is the podcast. So my question to you is, what is your next chapter that you're living? What's next for you?
I am getting ready to release my memoir. I just got tingles. I just did the cover reveal that is on my my social media. So you guys can check that out. It's the official cover reveal. So again, Lauren Eckhardt Writes. You can go and check that out. But the book is releasing on what is my 40th birthday, which is January 19th, 2024. And I'm really excited because it just feels like such a beautiful way to start that new year with the release of this memoir. And, it's one of those things where, again, I kind of fell into helping people write their memoirs. It was nothing I sought out, but it's what I know I was meant to do. And it's like, it's about time that I do my own then now too. And it feels really good to have this ready.
So when that comes out, please consider coming back. I'd love to have you back to share that with everyone.
Thank you.
Debbie, I know you're listening, Debbie. You need to go buy that book.
I think she has already, probably.
She probably, yes. She's well organized. And anyone that's gone through and worked with Lauren in the past, put that on your calendar. Make sure you have a copy of that book on your desk when it comes out. That's great. Lauren, thank you so much for making time to be on the podcast. Again, it's amazing when one guest brings a great resource like you into the world and shares how you changed their life and help them write their book and share their story. And then now to have you on the show, it's a great full circle moment for me. I'm really, really happy to have you here. So thank you for making time for me and for all of us listening, and for Debbie, and for all that you've done for authors. Continue doing it, and we're cheering you on. So thank you so much for doing it. Thank you. Really appreciate you being here and being part of our podcast community. livingthenextchapter.com is our website. I have an offer for you as an author, if you're listening, and you're wanting to build your website for your book. I've had so many authors come on and they're struggling in this area. I'd love to help you. All of the websites that I built for my different podcasts, I have experience, and I'd love to help you and get you up and running. I can help you with your domain purchase. I can help you with setting up your podcast, making it really simple. And if you love Canva, we can even set it up on Canva for you, and you can do all your own maintenance. You don't need to hire anybody. We'll help you get set up. So if that interests you as an author and you want a website for your book, let me know. We can do this. I can help you. livingthenextchapter.com is the website for the podcast. You can find me there. I'd love to help you. Reach out. Let me know if I can be of assistance in any way. And thank you again for listening to Living the Next Chapter. Today is where your book begins. Thanks for listening.
Mindshift Power Podcast, the podcast for teenagers and those who work with them. There's a huge problem in America today. There's a very large disconnect between teenagers and the adults who work with them. I'm looking to bridge that gap with real, raw, honest conversation, not held back by the chains of political correctness. You cannot solve a problem you do not understand. Want to understand teenagers today? Listen to this podcast. This podcast is for teens in the U.S. and Canada. To learn more, go to fatimabay.com/podcast or just look for Mindshift Power Podcast on any listening platform. I look forward to you being a faithful listener.